Red Ice Creations Radio. Thank you for tuning in. This is Henrik Palmgren, and we are coming to you from the west coast of Sweden. Take a look at our website, redicecreations.com, for regular news updates, links and resources, our radio archive, subscriber section, and much more. I'm glad you're here today. We have a very interesting guest and an interesting subject lined up. We are joined by explorer, author and publisher David Hatcher Childress. And today we are going to spend some time talking about the Olmecs. David Childress has written quite many books on everything from lost cities, technology of the gods, to mysteries of South America's early civilizations. And his latest book is entitled The Mystery of the Olmecs. And the culture and origins of the Maya, the Aztecs and the Incas is something that I've been intrigued with for a long time. And there are a number of lesser-known groups, tribes or cultures in South America that probably were around before those I just mentioned, like the Chachapoyas, the Toltecs, and of course the Olmecs. I also want to mention that David Childress is one of those guys who travels around a lot. He's like a modern-day Indiana Jones, I guess, and he's he got a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak. David founded the book publisher Adventures Unlimited Press back in '85 that carries a lot of great books, and if you want to take a look, just head on over to adventuresunlimitedpress.com and take a look at their online bookstore. So it's a pleasure to welcome David to the program. Thank you for coming on to Red Ice Creations Radio, David.
Hi, Frederick. Good to be on your show.
Great. It's nice to have you here. You seem like a really cool guy, as I mentioned, a modern-day Indiana Jones. I don't know if that would be a good description to give people kind of an idea of who you are and what background you have in this field.
Well, I am called real-life Indiana Jones a lot, and I like Indiana Jones. I love to travel. I like archaeology. I'm interested in esoteric things and the occult. I write, among other things, a series of books called the Lost Cities series, and it's all about lost pyramids in the jungle and ancient cities in the desert and underwater ruins and crystal skulls and all kinds of strange artifacts. So I do combine occult and esoteric things with general travel and archaeology and adventure.
Nice. I would love to hear a little bit about your background in this field and what kind of got you started looking towards these areas to begin with.
Well, yeah, and I think like so many people in America and Europe who are interested in history and archaeology and adventure in the past. I was born actually in France, and my parents are Americans, though, and my father was in the American military, and my family liked to travel a lot. My father was from Colorado, so I grew up traveling and going places with my parents. Also, I grew up in the Rocky Mountains, so I was very much outdoors skier. I liked backpacking and camping. Later, I became a mountain climber and was also interested in technical mountaineering. One of my heroes as a young boy actually was Edmund Hillary, one of the first people to climb Mount Everest. And I always was interested in Tibet, unusual places, going to the Gobi Desert. I wanted to paddle up the Amazon and go to mysterious ruins, in the jungle, crossing the Sahara Desert or the Gobi Desert, things like that. And I think I was lucky, really, in that, well, many, young men and women are want to go out and have adventures and travel around the world and do archaeological explorations. I was fortunate that I actually was able to go out and do those things. Yeah. And I began right out of high school. I graduated from high school in the mid-1970s, and I was studying Chinese, Mandarin, actually, at the University of Montana, plus archaeology and philosophy and history. And I had the opportunity to go, actually, originally to Taiwan as an English teacher. And I dropped out of school, and I did that. And my goal at the time was to go on to Southeast Asia, and then to India, and then to Nepal, and to Kathmandu, and then go climbing in the Himalayas, and technical climbing, in fact. And I was very fortunate that I was able to do all that. And I write about that in my book on lost cities of China, Central Asia, and India. Mm-hmm. But that began me on a worldwide trip. I was one of the early kind of $5 a day backpackers who I carried everything around with me in my backpack. I hitchhiked and I jumped on trains. I went across India and up to Kashmir, went through Pakistan. I even went to Afghanistan before the Russian invasion there. Was able to hitchhike across Iran and to Turkey and Syria and Jordan. I ended up in Israel and lived on a kibbutz there as a volunteer. There I met a lot of other Europeans, and including my old girlfriend who was from Karlskrona, Sweden. Mm-hmm. And we then traveled into Egypt and Sudan. This began several years of traveling through Africa. During that time, I was caught in the war in Uganda with Idi Amin. There were times in Africa too I had to carry a weapon with me. Mm-hmm. I was attacked once by a Tanzanian soldier who was trying to kill me, and later looted Idi Amin's house during the war. After that, I made it to Tanzania. And I was traveling, in fact, with my Swedish girlfriend at the time. And then we went to Mount Kilimanjaro, and I climbed that. That was the highest mountain in Africa. Mm-hmm. And then I continued to travel for 2.5 years through Africa, was caught up also in the guerrilla war in Sudan. Finally made it into southern Africa, to Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and to South Africa, Namibia. Later, I hitchhiked on yachts across the Indian Ocean. A lot of this is in my book on lost cities and ancient mysteries of Africa and Arabia. Mm-hmm. I crewed on yachts to the Seychelles Islands, to Mauritius, and going towards Madagascar. I returned, actually, to India then, went to the Maldives and Sri Lanka, went back to Pakistan and Nepal and India. Finally, I ended up in China, where I met an old friend, an American who had been also traveling around India and Nepal in those days. And we became two of the first backpackers to go through China and travel on trains. And we went out way west through the Gobi Desert and up into Mongolia. And eventually I returned to the U.S. That was after nearly 6 years of traveling around the world, working, living on a few dollars a day. Mm-hmm. And I came back to the U.S. and I wrote my first book on lost cities of Africa and Arabia. And then I was fortunate. I was able to turn my attention to South America and also to Central America. And I began traveling for years through Peru and Brazil, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, Ecuador, Paraguay, and other countries. And also eventually up into Central America and through Panama and Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, Belize, and Guatemala and Mexico. And all of this took me years. I wrote this series of books. One is called Lost Cities and Ancient Mysteries of African Arabia. Mm. One is also Lost Cities and Ancient Mysteries of South America. I have a book, too, about North and Central America, which includes, in fact, parts of the United States and Mexico. After that, I began also, I have a lot of interest in even cryptozoology. I've always been interested in unusual animals and everything from Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, now Chupacabras or whatever. And also in, ancient civilizations. One of my most popular books right now is a book called Technology of the Gods, where I've written quite a bit about ancient technology, megalith building, even the idea that many ancient civilizations had electricity, other kinds of machinery, and even incredibly vimanas and like ancient aircraft and things like that.
Wow, yeah, that's so intriguing. Definitely, if we have time today, that's something I'd love to touch upon a little bit later. But what I would like to ask you, considering all the traveling that you have done, and I know that this is difficult to answer, of course, but is there any place that kind of stands out, as like a favorite place of yours?
Well, I'm asked that a lot, of course, and people are always wanting me to tell them what my favorite place is or something like that. Yeah. And I honestly, I don't have any favorite place. I think different regions, I do have places around the world that I particularly enjoy, and of course, I very much like megalithic ruins, giant walls and cities, Atlantean kind of giant megaliths. And you can find those all over the world. I mean, Easter Island is, even though it's a small place, has a lot of that. Yeah. There's another mysterious island in Micronesia called Pohnpei. It has this giant city built out of basalt crystals on it. Cusco in Peru, which is the ancient Inca capital, is one of my favorite places. I always love going there and walking through the streets, and then the fantastic city of Machu Picchu is only a day away by train, and that's one of the great sights. I love going to Egypt, of course, and seeing those things, and then even traveling in Greece, and there's just so many fantastic places. Recently, I've been going to Mexico quite a bit, and I do enjoy that a lot, and that was a result of my most recent book, which is called The Mystery of the Olmecs.
Yeah, so let's get into that subject a little bit and talk about more about it. Let's say that we know nothing of the Olmecs. What is it that makes this civilization, a mystery, so to speak?
Well, the Olmecs are very little known, and even there are not very many books that have been written about the Olmecs at all. As I began doing my research over the last few years on the Olmecs, I was surprised how little has been written about them. There's really only 5 or 6 books that have been written about the Olmecs in the last 50 years since they were discovered. When we think of the Olmecs, usually the first thing that comes to mind is those giant, colossal heads that are carved out of basalt, and they look very African. Yeah. And when you look at these giant, they're called colossal heads by archaeologists, and they weigh about 20 tons. Sheesh. They find them mainly